The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law.
That's Kylie Minogue's sister, right? Danny Minogue? Yeah, Danny Minogue. Good choice, Dwayne. Good choice. Can't get you out of my head. We're talking about personal injury here on The Law Show on CL 650. Scott Stanley and Kevin Gourlay from Murphy Battista. Now, earlier I called you experts, but in the eyes of the Law Society, that's not allowed?
We can't claim that we're experts. We can't say we're experts, and we shouldn't be encouraging anyone to say that we are.
Well, I would suggest that you know more about the law than I do, therefore I look to you as an expert. That's not the way the Law Society sees it?
Well, that may be a layperson's perspective, but a lawyer can't. We're not like a profession, like a doctor, where they actually have categories of expertise.
Right.
Lawyers, I could do a will and do it really, really poorly, but I would be incompetent to do that. But we don't have categories of expertise, so we can't call ourselves experts. I've done this for 20 years. I've done the biggest case in BC history. Our firm is the biggest firm. We probably have one of the higher track records in terms of trial success, but I can't call myself an expert
in personal injury.
Correct.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So we learned something today. That's good to know. So we're talking about concussions. Now, you mentioned that the majority of people have a normal outcome. They come back to being their regular selves. So what is the timeline on that? And what do you need to do to get there, in your non-expert opinion?
The timelines vary hugely. Most people will get back to normal within weeks. Some hopefully within days. But it's once you start getting to the 6-month mark, to the 1 year mark, and ultimately past 2 years, when the rates of recovery, the rates of people returning to 100% get much lower.
Now, what is it for soft tissue injuries, for whiplash? Is that something that typically can... That's another gray area, isn't it?
Well, it's funny, for concussions and soft tissue injury, the consensus amongst doctors is if you're not better in 2 years, you're not going to get better. And I think that's probably accurate for soft tissue injuries. I'm not sure I believe that's the case with brain injuries, because I think the window for recovery is probably longer. It's probably more like 2 to 5 years. That's my personal observation, and I'm not a doctor, but just from what I've seen with my client population, I think people continue to make recovery beyond 2 years.
And you have to have that corroborated by family members to say, are they getting back to the old Bob or Joe or Stanley that we used to know, right?
I think your chances of a spontaneous neurological recovery are probably going to drop off sharply after 2 years. But what people achieve is a functional recovery. So one theory is that the brain, once injured, learns to reprogram and reroute itself, and it just needs some time to do that. It re-engineers itself, and I think that probably happens. But to the extent it doesn't, I think people just figure out ways to deal with their symptoms, to work around them.
Well, that is the body's way of compensating.
I think so, yeah.
And I say to people who have children who are not, they have different issues with learning. Well, they might be able to go to law school and be a lawyer or a doctor or what have you, but they're going to be able to compensate and be good at something else, because that's their body's way of overcoming their learning problem, and they end up being maybe the best musician, the world's best drummer or something, right? You never know.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing how the body and the brain can stick handle through a problem.
Doing this work for 20 years, you really understand how indomitable the human spirit is. It'll fight. It'll try to repair itself. It doesn't give up. It doesn't fail. It doesn't seek frivolous compensation the way ICBC and other insurance companies would have you believe. There's an instinct to fight and survive in every one of us.
So we had the boss on before, Joe Murphy, talking about this and the campaign ICBC had around fraud, and everybody's out trying to screw ICBC, and his claim is that it's not the case. There's all these checks and balances in the system to make sure that doesn't happen. So you must have the same situation when it comes to soft tissue injuries or concussions, that nobody wants to go through this, right? Is that... You're both nodding your head.
Of course. When you go through an injury claim like that, your life gets put under a microscope, and I certainly can't say that has never happened. But
there's always somebody who's going to try it, right? If there's an opportunity and a loophole, someone will try and take it.
I think that's fair to say that there's always going to be somebody who's going to try it. Mm-hmm. But I think that the percentage of the population that's walking around out there that's actually willing to put themselves through that is very, very small. And usually they're going to get caught doing so, and rightly so. I think most lawyers, I like to think anyways, don't have any interest in being a party to that kind of thing. And if we had those concerns about the client, they wouldn't be our client for very long.
Well, you hear those stories if someone is in a rear ender and they get out and they're grasping their neck. Oh, my neck, and I'm going to see my lawyer. And that doesn't happen though, does it?
Well, it really can't happen. I mean, for us, what a lot of people don't understand is for someone to do that, I mean, they'd have to come up to our big ivory tower and look me in the eye and lie to me. And I've been a lawyer for 20 years. People lie to me every day. It's usually the bad guys on the other end, right?
Oh, okay.
So I got a pretty good BS detector, and I cannot put anybody on the stand that I think is going to tell a lie. Ethically, I cannot do that. So for this to go down, the lawyer would have to be in on it, and I just can't see that. I mean,
you have such a big firm with the biggest cases and arguably the best track record. Why would you put that in jeopardy? Well,
a good track record. Exactly. I'm not going to jeopardize my entire portfolio of work for a client that I think is not truthful. I mean, what ICBC and insurance companies say is fraud or exaggeration is not. There are people that amplify their symptoms. And I just did a trial last month where there was this lady that injured her neck, and it was quite bad, and then all of a sudden her arm was sore, and then her leg was sore, and people say, well, how can that be other than the fact she's lying? Well, what the defense doctor said, the defense had a doctor, and I put him on the stand, and I put the literature to him, and what happens, Zach, is if someone has been exposed to pain for a long period of time, their nerves react to that. Nerves are our friends. They tell us we're in pain, don't do things, rest. And if you are in pain for long periods of time, your entire nervous system can become overreactive to the point where you feel symptoms elsewhere. And so that's not someone who's exaggerating. That's just someone who's having a sensation that's probably related to the first area that was painful.
I know because I have ongoing back and neck problems. I go and see physiotherapists and massage therapists, and it's just genetics. I don't have I have a long back and short legs. It's quite a look. Then they go to my chiropractor and I said, this is hurting. And he says, well, your body's overcompensating for your sore shoulder, and you can draw a T on the upper left-hand side. It's sore on the bottom right-hand side. It'll be sore. That's what they call it. So your body does, once again, overcompensate for things. Mm-hmm. The brain compensates if it's had an injury, and your body compensates if you're injured your leg. Your other leg is going to be doing all the work, right?
Absolutely.
Well, the other thing is people tend to catastrophize. There's just some personalities that catastrophize. Like, my grandfather was, shelled in the Philippines. That guy didn't complain about anything.
No.
But there's people that have had different experiences, right? And psychology and psychiatric injuries play a huge role in this. What I think is more common than is diagnosed is people have really severe psychiatric reactions to being injured for prolonged periods of time, like conversion disorders, where, and actually this is a risk with people that have got brain injuries. If a person doesn't have a brain injury, or even if they do, and they're told, you've got a brain injury, and they're not reassured, they will go off and perseverate and think that their brain is bleeding within. And they'll go on to develop a very severe conversion disorder sometimes, which is actually way worse than a brain injury could ever possibly be.
So can you back that up? What does a conversion disorder mean? They actually believe they have something else?
So a conversion disorder is a psychological or psychiatric condition where a person has a physical sensation or symptom that they perceive and feel to be real, but it doesn't have an organic or a physiological explanation. It's basically like having a virus on your computer. Your brain has a virus that's convincing it that it's injured when it's not. So the sensations are real to them, but they're not physically real. And another colleague at the firm, we just did a trial where this lady was completely incapacitated. She could hardly walk because she had been misdiagnosed by her doctors as having had a concussion when she didn't. And she went on to develop a very, very severe and intractable conversion disorder. Way worse than any brain injury I've seen.
Wow, that's interesting. So what do you do in those situations? Like, how do you prove that that's the case and the person isn't just Well, I guess in reality they are imagining it, but the brain is so powerful that these symptoms manifest themselves, right?
It's exactly what you tell them. You basically tell the jury or the judge that everything my client is going to tell you is simply it's true, but it's not real. Mm-hmm. And you just have to work backwards from there.
That's fascinating. Never a dull day at your office.
No.
It really is fascinating stuff. Scott Stanley and Kevin Gourlay are my guests, personal injury lawyers at Murphy Battista. And we'll continue our conversation about outcomes, concussions, brain injuries, and you name it when we return next on The Law Show on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.